Your life at every stage of building generational wealth. Stage 1. The inheritance you didn't receive. You are 24 years old and you are starting from zero. Not the kind of zero that comes with a safety net underneath it. Not the kind of zero where a phone call to the right person solves the problem. The kind of zero where you are the first person in your family's history to have a salary with benefits and a 401k you don't fully understand, and the specific weight of knowing that nobody ahead of you left a map. Your parents worked hard, consistently, with the kind of effort that deserves more than it received. Your father spent 31 years at the same company and retired with a pension that covers the basics and not much beyond them. Your mother managed the household with a precision that should have been compensated and wasn't. They gave you everything they could. What they could not give you was a head start measured in dollars. There is no inheritance coming. Not because your family failed, because the system they operated inside was not designed to produce surplus for people at their income level. It was designed to produce just enough to keep going, just enough to raise children who might do slightly better, just enough that the idea of leaving something behind felt like a luxury that other families had. Families with different last names, different zip codes, different access to the kind of information that compounds the same way money does.
You sit with this for a while, not with resentment. Resentment is a feeling that spends energy without producing anything. You sit with it the way you sit with a fact that is true and inconvenient and unchangeable and must therefore become the starting point rather than the obstacle. The starting point is this: you are the first. Not the first to work hard, not the first to want more, the first to have the combination of income, information, and intention that makes it possible to build something that outlasts you. The first to have access to accounts and instruments and compounding mechanisms that previous generations in your family either didn't know about or couldn't afford to use. The first generation to build is always the hardest generation. You don't get the tailwind. You are the tailwind. Everything you build will be the head start you didn't have. Every decision you make correctly will be the inheritance your children receive without knowing the cost of it. Every year you stay consistent will be a year of compounding that your grandchildren will benefit from without understanding where it came from. That is not a burden. That is the most important thing a person can do with a life. You open the account. You make the first transfer. The amount is small. The direction is everything.
Stage 2, the foundation years. You are 27 years old and the foundation is being poured. Nobody can see it. That is the nature of foundations. They exist below the surface, in the part of the structure that nobody photographs and nobody compliments and nobody notices until it's missing. Your combined accounts, Roth IRA, 401k, a small brokerage you opened because the Roth contribution limit felt insufficient once you understood what you were building, hold $34,000. The number is real and it is invisible, and both of those things are true simultaneously. Your salary is $61,000. You were living on approximately 70% of it. Not dramatically, not monastically. You made a series of small decisions that together produce a gap between what you earn and what you spend. And that gap is the foundation. The gap is where generational wealth begins. Not in the investment account, not in the index fund, not in the compound interest calculation you ran on a Tuesday night that made the number look almost fictional 30 years out. In the gap. The gap is a decision made every month about the distance between income and lifestyle. Most people close the gap as fast as it opens. Raise comes in, lifestyle expands to meet it. Bonus arrives, purchase follows within weeks. The gap never widens because the culture is organized entirely around closing it as quickly as possible. You are leaving the gap open.
Not because you are better than the people closing theirs, Because you have understood something about time that most people understand too late, which is that time is the only variable in the compounding equation that cannot be recovered once it is spent. Money spent and regretted can be replaced. Time spent and regretted cannot. You are 27. Every dollar that goes into the gap right now has 40 years to compound before you reach the traditional retirement age. 40 years of a market that has, historically, doubled roughly every 7 years. The math of this is not complicated. The discipline of it is. Your parents visit on a Sunday. Your father looks at your apartment. Modest, functional, the kind of place that tells no particular story about the person living inside it. And he says something you will think about for years afterward. He says, "I just want more for you than we had." You tell him he gave you more than he knows. You mean it, not as consolation, as a precise statement of fact. Because what your parents gave you was not money. What they gave you was the specific motivation that comes from watching people you love work as hard as they worked and receive as little as they received. That motivation is not nothing. That motivation is the reason the gap exists. The reason you leave it open every month when everything around you is telling you to close it. Your father doesn't know about the accounts. You have not told your parents about the accounts because money in your family was always a source of stress rather than a subject of conversation. And you are not yet sure how to change that dynamic. You will learn. That is a later stage. For now, the foundation is being poured. Below the surface, invisible, structurally essential.
Stage 3. The decade of discipline. You are 34 years old, and the decade is almost complete. 10 years of the gap. 10 years of contributions that felt too small at the beginning and began to feel significant somewhere around year 6 when the compounding crossed a threshold you couldn't quite name but could clearly feel. 10 years of the market going up and the market going down and your hands staying still through both because you had read enough and experienced enough to understand that movement is the enemy of compounding. Your accounts hold $187,000. Say that number out loud, not to anyone else, to yourself. Because the person who started at zero 12 years ago and built $187,000 through ordinary income and consistent behavior and the specific discipline of leaving the gap open through every raise and every correction and every dinner where their life didn't look like progress deserves to hear that number said out loud by someone who knows what it cost. It cost nothing dramatic. That is the most important thing about it. No second job worked at midnight, no side hustle scaled to exhaustion, no risk taken that kept you awake. Just the same boring decision made in the same boring direction for 10 years. The boring decision compounded the same way the money did. By year 10, it wasn't a decision anymore. It was a personality. The kind of person you would become was the kind of person who leaves the gap open. That identity is now structural. It will not collapse in a weak moment the way a diet collapses or a resolution dissolves. It is who you are now.
You have a conversation with your younger sister this year. She's 26. She has a good job, a real salary, and the beginnings of a financial life that could go in either direction, depending on decisions she is making right now without fully understanding that she is making them. You sit with her for 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon, and you tell her everything. Not as a lecture, as a transfer. The 401k match she is leaving on the table, the Roth IRA she has not opened, the lifestyle inflation that is happening so gradually she cannot feel it, the gap, what it is, why it matters, what it produces over time. You show her the accounts, not to impress her, to make the abstract concrete, to show her that the number is real and it was built by someone with an ordinary salary making ordinary decisions with extraordinary consistency. She is quiet for a long time. Then she asks, "Why didn't anyone ever tell us this?" You think about your parents, your father's 31 years at the same company, your mother's precision that went uncompensated,
the system that was designed to produce just enough. The information that circulated freely in some zip codes and barely at all in yours. Nobody told us, you say, so we're telling each other. She opens the account before she leaves that afternoon. She sets the transfer to $400 a month. It is the beginning of something that will outlast this conversation by decades. You have just done something your parents could not do for you. You have passed information forward. Not money yet. Information, which is the precursor to money, which is in many ways more valuable than money, because money without information disappears, and information without money eventually produces it. The wealth is beginning to be generational, not in the accounts yet, in the knowledge. Stage 4, the multiplication. You are 41 years old, and the math has changed character. Not the math itself, the way it feels, the way it behaves, the way it shows up in the account every month as a number that is no longer primarily a reflection of what you contributed, but increasingly a reflection of what the money itself has been doing while you were living your life. Your accounts hold $490,000. Last year, without a single additional dollar of effort, your portfolio returned $47,000. $47,000 that you did not earn at a job, did not negotiate in a salary conversation, did not create through any action beyond the original action of starting and the subsequent action of not stopping. The machine you built in your 20s is now running faster than you can run alongside it. This is the stage nobody visualizes when they are 24 and starting from zero. The starting feels hard, and the contributions feel small, and the destination feels theoretical. What nobody tells you is that there is a middle stage, not the beginning and not the end, but somewhere in the disciplined middle, where the math shifts from linear to exponential, and the account stops feeling like a savings vehicle and starts feeling like a separate organism that is growing on its own schedule according to its own logic. And your primary job is simply to not interfere. Your primary job now is to not interfere. Your sister calls you to tell you her accounts have crossed $100,000. She is 33. She has been contributing for 7 years. She sounds the way you sounded when you crossed your first significant threshold. Not celebratory, not dramatic, just quietly confirmed. Like something she suspected was true has been proven true. Like the machine works, and she now has evidence of that in a number she can look at. You tell her what Darnell told you in a hallway a long time ago with 4 words that rearranged something. You tell her, don't touch it, ever. She laughs. She knows. She won't. The family conversation about money has changed. It started with you and your sister on a Saturday afternoon with accounts and honesty and the specific intimacy of showing someone a number that represents years of invisible discipline. It has spread since then. Your sister told her husband told his brother asked you questions you answered honestly and without performance because the information is not something to hoard. Information hoarded helps one person. Information shared compounds across a family the same way money compounds in an account. You are 41 years old, and you are building something that has never existed in your family before. Not just money, a relationship with money that gets passed forward instead of left behind. Stage 5, the conversation you prepared for. You are 48 years old, and your child is 16. You have been preparing for this conversation since before they were born. Not scripting it, preparing for it the way you prepare for anything important, by doing the work that makes the conversation true rather than theoretical. Your accounts combined hold $780,000. Your home is paid off, which was a decision you made at 43, after calculating that the psychological value of ownership without debt was worth more to you than the mathematical argument for keeping the mortgage and investing the difference. You made the human decision instead of the optimal one, and you do not regret it. You sit with your child on a Sunday evening and you have the conversation. Not about the number, about the system.
You explain how compound interest works the way you wish someone had explained it to you at 16. Not as a concept, as a story. The story of what $200 a month at 16 becomes by the time they are 60, which is a number so large it sounds fictional until you show them the math. And the math is just multiplication applied to time, applied to a percentage that has been historically reliable for a century. You explain the gap, what it is, why it exists, why most people close it reflexively, and what happens to the people who don't. You explain the difference between looking wealthy and being wealthy, the car that signals arrival versus the account that produces it, the apartment that costs $800 more because the kitchen signals something versus the apartment that costs $800 more because it genuinely serves your life. You explain what your parents gave you and what they couldn't. And you explain what you are giving your child, not just the information, but the demonstration. 16 years of watching a parent make decisions about money that were quiet and consistent and unglamorous and that produced something real. 16 years of understanding, without being told explicitly, that the family's relationship with money is different from what most people around them have. That money in this family is not a source of shame or stress or silence. It is a subject, a skill, a practice that gets better with attention. Your child listens in the way that teenagers listen when they sense that something important is being said. Not fully present, not fully absent, somewhere in between, absorbing more than they show. At the end of the conversation, they ask one question. Why don't they teach this in school? You think about every answer to that question, the systems that benefit from financial illiteracy, the institutions that profit from the gap between what people know and what they do, the generations of families that started from zero and stayed there, not from lack of effort, but from lack of information that circulated freely somewhere else. They don't, you say. So we teach each other. It is almost exactly what you said to your sister 15 years ago on a Saturday afternoon. Some things are worth repeating.
Stage 6, the crossing. You are 57 years old, and the number has crossed $1 million. Not dramatically, not on a day that felt significant in any other way. On an ordinary Tuesday in November, the market moved moderately upward, and the portfolio crossed a threshold that most Americans never cross, and that your family has never crossed, and that you began building toward on an ordinary day 33 years ago, when you opened an account with an amount so small you were almost embarrassed by it. You do not call anyone. You sit with it for a long time. The way you have learned to sit with things that are true and significant and cannot be fully communicated to someone who hasn't lived the distance between the beginning and this. Then you call your sister. She is 49. Her accounts hold $620,000. Her daughter, your niece, is 19 and has had a Roth IRA since she was 17, funded first by your sister and now by the part-time job she works between semesters. The niece did not have to be convinced. She grew up in a family where the conversation about money was normal and ongoing and factual, rather than shameful and silent and avoided. She opened the account the way you might open any account for something you have always known you needed, without drama, without the specific fear of starting something you don't understand. She understood, because someone made sure she would.
Your sister answers on the second ring. I crossed $1 million, you say. She is quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know what to say, the quiet of someone who is doing the math, running the trajectory of her own account forward, feeling the shape of something she has been building toward for more than 2 decades. Mom and Dad would not believe this, she says. You think about your father. 31 years at the same company, the pension that covers the basics, the Sunday visit where he looked at your modest apartment and said he just wanted more for you than they had. He got it. Not the way he imagined. Not a windfall, not a lucky break, not a sudden change in circumstances.
He got it the way things actually work, which is slowly and quietly and through 1,000 ordinary decisions made in the same boring direction for long enough that the math became undeniable. They gave us the reason, you say. We just figured out the mechanism.
Stage 7. What you leave behind. You are 67 years old. Your accounts hold $2.3 million. Your home is owned. Your children are adults with their own accounts, their own gaps, their own versions of the Saturday afternoon conversation that your sister had with you decades ago, and that you have had with them, and that they will have with their own children in kitchens that don't exist yet. The wealth is generational now, not just in the money, in the knowledge that compounds across people the same way money compounds across time, in the family that talks about money instead of around it, in the children who understood before they needed to that the gap is not a deprivation, but a decision, that looking wealthy and being wealthy are not the same life, that the boring decision and the consistent decision and the decision nobody throws a party for is the one that builds the thing that lasts. You think about what you are leaving behind, not just the accounts, though the accounts are real and they matter, and they will provide your children with the head start you did not have, the one your parents wanted for you and could not manufacture with the tools available to them in the world they inhabited. What you are leaving behind is a different relationship with money than the one you inherited. Your parents inherited silence around money, shame around money, the specific anxiety of people who worked hard and had little to show for it and did not know why, and did not have the language or the information to find out. You inherited that too, and then you changed it. Not through extraordinary income, not through luck or inheritance or a break that changed everything, through information applied consistently over time in the same boring direction, without an audience and without a signal from the outside world that it was working, until it was undeniably working. And by then, it had already become who you were rather than what you were doing. Your grandchild is 3 years old. They will never know what it felt like to start from zero. They will never know the specific weight of being the first. They will grow up in a family that talks about money the way other families talked about money in other zip codes when you were young, as a subject, a skill, a practice, something that is learned and discussed and passed forward rather than avoided and feared and left behind as a silence the next generation has to decode alone. That is what generational wealth actually is. Not a number, not an account, not a trust fund or an inheritance or a windfall passed from one hand to another. It is a relationship with money that improves across generations, that starts with one person who decided to understand something their parents couldn't teach them, who learned it themselves and then taught it to the people they loved, who built something invisible and structural and lasting, not in the ground, but in the minds of the people who came after them. You are 67 years old. You started from zero. You are leaving behind something that will never go back to zero. Not because of the accounts, because of the conversation. The one that started on a Tuesday night with a spreadsheet and a decision that felt almost embarrassingly small given the size of what you were trying to build. The one you passed to your sister on a Saturday afternoon. The one she passed to her daughter. The one your children will pass to theirs. The one that is happening right now, in families that don't know yet that they are starting it, in the moment someone opens an account with an amount so small they're almost embarrassed by it, and makes the first transfer, and feels nothing dramatic, and closes the laptop and goes to sleep. That is the moment. That is always the moment. Not the million, not the crossing, not the number that would have seemed fictional to the 24-year-old who started from zero with nothing ahead of them except the specific clarity of knowing they were the first. The moment is the transfer. Small, quiet, directed. The beginning of something that will outlast you.